The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where I explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. This is a really quick intro because I will actually be going on holiday for the next couple of weeks. So by the time this is released, I will hopefully be sunning myself in the south of France. So for the next few weeks, we'll just go straight to the interviews. But I would like to thank my fantastic social media manager, Rebecca Fitzgerald, who's been helping me out with my social for the last month or two. And she'll be helping me put the episodes out while I'm away. So on to today's episode, we are speaking to a great guy called Avihu Tamir, who is Israeli and is the CEO of a company called Kanabo Research, and he'll be talking to us a bit about the cannabis sector in Israel and all the exciting things that are happening there. Enjoy. Okay, today we've got Avihu Tamir on the show. Avihu is the founder and CEO of a company called Kanabo Research, which is an Israeli cannabis R&D company. Avihu is a former strategy consultant at Accenture, who's now focusing on the cannabis industry. He's going to help us understand a bit more about what's happening in general in Israel in the cannabis sector. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Cool. So why don't we kick off with a bit about what you do? What does Kanabo do?
So Kanabo is an R&D company, as you mentioned, and focusing specifically on vaporization of cannabis and technologies of vaporization. So everyone, when they first hear about vaporization, they think it's just this device, this hardware. But actually a lot of the research is going into the formulas that is going into the different cartridges. Right. So what we're doing is if I'm comparing it to the world of pharmaceuticals, it's a type of a drug device combination. In our case, it's a cannabis formulation and a device. And today we have a device that is probably the first in the world that had a medical device certificate and can provide a meter dose of inhalation. So physicians and even patients like it very much to be able to dose exactly their cannabis. And at the same time, we're developing formulas that are for specific indications. So we're taking different strains, mixing them, playing with the cannabinoid profiles, terpene profiles, and matching them to specific indications via preclinical trials and clinical trials. So we're trying to take this very serious based on science and taking a route that physicians will feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And this is where we are today.
Great. That sounds really interesting because a lot of the stuff that I've read about is conceptually quite difficult for doctors to prescribe cannabis when it's difficult to give you an accurate dose. So that's a very good development that you're trying to address.
Yeah. One of the things that my personal doctor told me once, that cannabis is great, and I do believe it's helping in many indications. But it's not a drug. It's an agriculture product. It's a plant. It's not reproducible. Every time it will be different. And then you almost have no capability to have correct dosing. So for physicians that, for hundreds or thousands of years, what they learn is to write a prescription with a specific dose. Extremely hard for them.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it, actually. It's that consistency that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And do you guys grow your own cannabis? Or when you do the extraction as well? Or?
So, no, we are currently partnering with several growers in Israel and outside of Israel as well.
Okay.
And we're providing the protocols, the formulas, to our manufacturers. So we have partnerships with manufacturers in Israel, already in Europe as well, and we're providing them the raw material as well, and combining everything together in our research.
Fantastic. Okay, and the hardware as well. Are you producing that, or is that relatively easy part of the puzzle?
I won't say it's easy part. We're not owning the manufacturer, but we are the one that owning the distribution rights and the rights on the current device as well.
Okay.
So in reality, most of the challenges are in the regulation. How do you in order to get to a medical device, you need to certify the facility, the manufacturer. You need to create a clinical evaluation for the device. You need to really have the capability to speak with the notified bodies in order to receive the permits and regulations. Wow. That's our part. We are more in the side of product development than in the production itself.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mentioned that you used to work for Accenture, which is obviously a huge consultancy firm. How did you go from doing that to getting into cannabis? And what was your reasons?
2-3 years after being in Accenture, I discovered that I'm not a type of corporate America. It's great. It's an amazing school, management consulting, investment banking. It's good as a school, learn the world of business, but didn't give me the drive of waking up in the morning and like what I'm doing. And I left Accenture for my first startup. That was a location-based app. And I sold a year and a half for an Israeli local company. And they stumbled upon the cannabis industry, I would say, partially by mistake from a personal story background. And I suffered from migraine since I was a kid. My physician was a neurologist, and he asked me if I ever tried cannabis. And then he recommended, okay, let's try. He had, I think, at that point, 200, 300 patients that were receiving treatments with cannabis quite well. So that was my first entry. I went into the cannabis industry, I got my prescription, and then I discovered that you're supposed to smoke the medicine. I wasn't a smoker at that time. And that was a bit weird as a concept. So I started to look if there's anything else out there. And then I opened my first company in the cannabis industry that was importing current vaporizers for flowers of cannabis and distributing in Israel. Israel have a cannabis program since 2006, so it's one of the first in the world. And from there, building Kanabo research.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So first-hand experience of finding a market need, finding a problem that needs solving.
It's always the easiest if you are like your own customer as well, so you understand the needs of the customers. It is helping.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice for anyone that's looking to start up in this space, I think. Cool. Okay, well, so you slightly alluded to the fact that Israel is one of the pioneers in this area. Would you mind just sort of giving us an overview of cannabis in Israel and what the sector looks like?
Israel cannabis, I think, fair started a long time ago. A professor named Rafael Meshulam decided that he's going to do his postdoctorate in searching of the different cannabinoids in cannabis. And we're talking about the 60s. Everyone obviously were laughing at him then. They called him Dr. Cannabis. And in order to receive his cannabis, he went to the police and got some hash that they had there. It took him, he's always telling, some time to get the hash. And then he was the first one in the world that isolate the THC and then the CBD as well. That's already in the 60s. And from there, he moved on to start building some pharmaceutical or bioavailability standards for the cannabis. But the big breakthrough of cannabis, I think, in the world, only looking at research, was in the 90s when him and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, with a few other colleagues around the world, mapped out and found the endocannabinoid system. And endocannabinoid system was a breakthrough. He received the highest science prize in Israel, called the Israeli Prize for Science. People are talking that perhaps he will get one day the Nobel Prize for this.
Wow. Because
until 5-10 years ago, in medical school, you would not learn about the endocannabinoid system. Blood system, digestive system, fine. But a whole system in the body that doctors didn't learn.
Wow.
And everything changed since then. So this basis of research really rooted inside Israel with cannabis as well. And the government and the Ministry of Health are fairly open and assisting with license to do research. So today we have in the company 3 licenses to perform research with cannabis. One on the side of extraction and formulation. The other one is for developing a medical device based on cannabis. And the third one for preclinical trials. Now we're undergoing to getting the fourth one for clinical trials with cannabis. And you see that the whole system understands the potential. So it doesn't take you a long time. And you have the capability. Universities are supporting it. Hospitals, most of the Israeli hospitals today have units that are doing clinical trials with cannabis. So that's how you build, this powerhouse and hub. And Israel was probably the first or the second federally legal medical cannabis program. We're talking about 2006.
Wow.
So it's quite a lot in years. And Israel in generally is better in innovation, in startups, and building new things than really scaling up to huge companies. And that's happening the same in cannabis. You see this innovation, a lot of new startups that are starting.
So it feels to me that a lot of the good stuff that's coming out of Israel is very kind of science-based in the sort of biotech space where they're really leading. And as you said, it's one of the first medical programs at a national level in the world. Given that Israel's been so progressive in this approach to the medical side of things, how is the mood in relation to recreational in Israel?
Israel is a country is fairly conservative. And you see it with the same aspect for recreational of cannabis. On one hand, if you will sit in a coffee house in Tel Aviv, you would you will smell cannabis everywhere. Cannabis is freely consumed out in Tel Aviv everywhere, and there's no enforcement whatsoever. More than that, a few months ago it was decriminalized. So even if it's being enforced, you're getting a fine and slap on the wrist. One more interesting piece of information is consumption of cannabis. Israel is probably the number one per capita in the world. 25% in the last survey of 18 and above said that they smoked cannabis in the last year.
Wow.
That's a quarter of the population. But recreational use seems still a bit far.
Right.
Medical program will probably grow quickly, but I don't see that Israel will be the first, in this region to be a recreational market.
That's good to know. It's very interesting. I think we have a similar thing here in the UK. Although I would say, and perhaps I'm more in touch with what's going on, but I'm definitely seeing much more conversation around the idea of recreational legalization in the UK. So perhaps conversations are going in Israel as well.
I can tell you that, first of all, I started to come here in September last year. Met bankers, met investors, and talked to them about listing a cannabis company. And they thought that I just landed out of outer space or something. That was very weird for them. They had no information. Many asked me, what's exactly the difference between CBD and THC? Or even, is there a market for this? How do you know how big is this market? What's the potential of cannabis? And you understand that they truly have no understanding of this market. Now, almost any investor that's really curious on public market want to invest in cannabis. Now it's a no-brainer anymore. The challenge is you choose the right company maybe, but you want to be in the cannabis industry because you understand that in the last 10, 20 years, this is one of the fastest growing industry in the world. So I see the shift, and recreational will happen as well in the end. As I see it, there's two paths for a country to evolve. One is that you see a very advanced and comfortable medical program like Germany. In Germany, any physician can just prescribe cannabis. And the number one problem they have now is a lack of product and supply.
And they've also got the insurance companies on board.
On top of it, you have, if you do get a prescription, it's covered by insurance. So that's amazing.
It's great.
On the other hand, you have the United States, where the pharmaceutical companies are so strong, and they would not let this become really medical platform that will replace opiates or sleeping pills. And they're controlling the FDA as well. So the FDA said, so we're not involved in this. This is not a medicine. And then what's happening is recreational. So you have like pressure to legalize something. And if you have no root on the medical side, what's happening usually is this recreational is starting to grow quite quickly. Mm. So in the US, you don't really have any medical programs. You don't have a real medical market. The medical market is semi-recreational, and the recreational market is a real recreational market. Yeah. And that's why it's growing quickly there. I don't know enough in the UK to understand what path is more likely to grow quicker.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to predict, mainly for several reasons. Brexit is probably taking up a lot of people's times. They haven't put a framework in place for how you get medicine to people, but hopefully they'll start to figure these things out. But yeah, bring it back to the UK for a minute. There was a recent report that was released by the CMC, the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, about CBD in the UK, and it's a very meaningful number already. I think £300 million worth. And that's not even, we're just at the beginning. How is, what's the state of CBD in Israel? Is it becoming popular?
Sadly, CBD in Israel is on the same regulatory level as THC.
Really?
Only medicinal.
So you can't buy it over the counter sort of thing?
Well, you can, again, not enforced. So you can go in Tel Aviv and buy, but it's illegal.
Okay.
It's cannabis. The gray part in cannabis is bigger than the black or the white part. That's what you trying to understand.
That's a quotable there.
Yeah. Regulation is in this industry is just coming after reality. Now in Israel, Ministry of Finance is speaking with other ministries and talking about, okay, first of all, we need to fix the CBD regulation. That has to be legal. The minute that you have ministers coming out and saying this has to be legal and there's no enforcement, reality happens and people are just opening stores and starting to sell, not being stopped, and the law is just moving slower than reality. That will change as well. I think CBD is one of the interesting things that happening to the industry, because people are starting to understand that cannabis is not only some recreational drug to get you high. And in the beginning, when I was speaking with people and telling them there are strains of cannabis that they're not making you high, they were confused. It's like, it's not cannabis. Like, genetically, it's the same as cannabis. There's no difference. And then the second question, so why would people use it? And when people see that there are strains that would not make you high, and CBD, by the way, is just one of the non-psychoactive cannabinoids. Now we're looking at CBG and we know that it's very beneficial. Some other stuff. We're working with our cartridges with CBN for assisting in sleeping. It's much, much bigger market than just getting high.
Yeah. And that for me is the really exciting bit. Everyone's talking about CBD now as the health fad, but soon the conversation is going to move on to CBG, CBN, and then, and then combinations of all of those things. Yeah. That's what's going to get really interesting, I think.
Yeah. One of the interesting trends now in the US with baby boomers and older generation is microdosing, low THC on a daily basis. The understanding is that if you consume something on a daily basis and microdosing, together you're starting to have an effect, but you don't have these peaks of psychoactive. So you're getting all the benefit, the health benefit, the wellness benefits of cannabis, and in the same time, you can be operational, go to work, do everything even better than normal, affecting the mood, affecting your sleep cycles, assisting in many, many things. And this older generation is coming and say, but we don't want these oils with 80, 90% THC. They're freaking out from this. It's not for them. And you see products that were non-existing before. Product when you have 2-3% THC, and the rest is other cannabinoids. And this is something that I believe we'll start seeing more. In Switzerland today, this is a big market.
Yes.
And now Italy is going on the same path. So that's something that we'll have to take a look.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Switzerland, actually, because a lot of Europe is a 0.2% THC limit on products. It's either if you go above that, then it's illegal. Yeah. But I've been reading a lot more about the fact that if you have a bit more THC, it makes the all-round experience more beneficial.
So this is one of the things we checked in our preclinical trial. So we had a preclinical trial. We tested 55 different formulations, starting from single cannabinoids with different doses, then mixing cannabinoids together, and then adding terps by themselves and a combination. The idea was to show the entourage effect that we know in theory and to show in numbers how it works. Mm-hmm. And you see that even like a dash of THC changed the whole combination. Mm. And you see an entourage effect that is much bigger synergy, basically. Yeah. Similar things we see with terpenes, acting the similar way. A small amount completes and have a synergetic effect with the other cannabinoids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the market now is changing as well. You don't see anymore. You do still see some, products with added CBD, isolated CBD, but you see that the more experienced or knowledgeable consumers are looking for these whole plants extract that has more than that.
Yeah. I was very lucky to meet Professor Dedi Mary from Technion University a couple of months ago, and he delivered a talk at the Royal College of Medicine, and he showed us all the cannabinoid profiles and just tweaking things here and there and how it had a different effect. And he's doing some fantastic work and with a huge team. So there's lots of exciting things ahead. Cool. Okay. So one of the themes of my show is sort of thinking about the European market. What's your view on the European market? I mean, and also it's quite difficult when you say Europe because it's so big and different in different places.
I think that Europe is going to develop differently than North America. Mm. We will see some recreational markets probably in the next 3 years, but mainly Europe will stay medical cannabis, not recreational cannabis. While North America will go recreational probably in the next 5-10 years across the board. So that's going to be one big difference. Even the production standard in Europe are much higher. One of the reasons there's a lack of cannabis in Germany is the standard of GMP manufacturing that is not existing, not in Canada or in the US. Basically, because of the demand from Germany, you see Canadian companies now changing their production standard to EU GMP. Mm. So that's one of the unique things of Europe. Obviously, the second unique thing is that it's a lot of silos because the medical cannabis legislation is different by any state. Every state in Europe will be different for probably a long time. Mm. And that gives you, on one hand, a challenge and at the same time an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think that many of the US companies are now looking at Europe as a big potential market, but would not step in until a later stage. Mm. So what I believe in Europe is that we can see local companies growing from the ground up as European cannabis companies that are focused in Europe, that the products are being designed as European products, European standard, and even the methods of distribution and branding. Usually what's happening is that you see these huge American brands coming here and taking over. Perhaps in cannabis, we have a few more years that you will see first European companies that are gaining ground, and only later on some North American companies. Yeah, Canadians are investing, but at this point mainly in cultivation, grabbing licenses for cultivation. So mainly I believe that the market will focus on medical cannabis.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's what made it very exciting for me to come into the cannabis industry, because there were those natural barriers for the big US companies from whichever background. The federal prohibition is probably making them wait on the sidelines, and it gives an opportunity for startups like Kanabo, and you have a fighting chance to get involved and build something really special before the big guys come in. My final question is usually, what did your family say when you told them that you were getting into cannabis as a profession?
In the beginning, when we thought, okay, I need to explain to my parents, it was 2012. It wasn't these days. It was 2012. I remember I was speaking with my wife. I told her how we present it, that they will feel comfortable. They were very supportive, surprisingly supportive. They were very curious to hear. I had a personal story, and they saw that it's very helpful.
Yeah.
In replacing, the narcotics and opiates. So it was easier to understand.
Yeah.
But now we had 180 degrees turn. Now, if I'm not bringing some CBD pills to my parents on Friday dinner, they're upset. And it's truly a real story. Today, they will call me and say, like, don't forget to bring some cannabis. I'm like, Mom, it's not for you. It's not for you. Research material.
Yes, yeah.
But, you see, even, in the core family, how quickly things are turning. With cannabis, I think one of the things that 10 years ago, it was a dangerous drug. Today is a medicine for everything.
Yeah.
Reality is between.
Absolutely.
But the change of the cannabis revolution compared to look in history and other revolutions, probably one of the fastest.
Yeah.
And we'll see probably a few years from now, people will look back and start to map it out. The first cannabis legally was sold recreationally in January 2014. And it seems that this revolution is everywhere.
Yeah.
And didn't even start yet.
That's a brilliant way to end it. And converting your family to people who, can take the product and understand its benefits that's a great way to round off the story, I think.
Yeah. It's helping. It's helping. And not smoking was a big help on that.
Yes.
If I'm bringing to my parents a tincture or a pill or a vape, no problem. If I will put a flower or I will roll it into a joint, because even cigarettes is a negative thing. Then you're combining it with something that is negative, it's difficult.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to bring up. I think so many people instantly think of smoking joints, and one or two of those things puts a lot of people off. So these different delivery methods are certainly opening it up, I think. And well done for you for pushing on the research and developing things. Thank you so much. I thought that was such a brilliant talk, and we would love to have you on a show again when Kanabo has reached the next stage of its development. So welcome you back.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.